I've been working on a little thing I like to call Let's Change Capitalism. It's a small project. I'm almost through with it, but need a little bit of help. It's something I've actually been working on for 27 years. When I was 17 and a freshman in college, a bunch of us students took over the administration building at my university to demand that the university endowment not invest in companies that were doing business in South Africa and the apartheid regime. And that's where I got the bug. And I started realizing the importance of thinking about our money and where it's going and what it is doing in the world. And Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela later said that it was the work of students in this country that helped that process and the regime change. That was very, very empowering for me, and it changed my life. And if you would have ever thought that I would end up as a financial advisor helping other people manage their money and helping them to use money as a force for positive social and environmental change, it's been a long journey for me, and I'm really thrilled. And this change is happening, and I am more optimistic now than ever. But there really is nothing new about this. In a way, we're just reclaiming something very old. You know, societies across the planet, mostly Eastern in nature, have always had an integrated life. They've always been a part of nature. They've always had strong culture, had a strong connection to one another to create a more sustainable society. And these traditions are everywhere. They are here. A lot of the ways in which we live our lives are not new, but we've sort of lost our way. And what we're really trying to do now is reclaim this ancient DNA that we all have within us to live the more interconnected life. And this is the way that we have to do it, because we live a very fragmented life that says you make money over here and you do good over here. And that is an arbitrary way of looking at the world, which makes absolutely no sense. And what we're seeing right now is a global transformation that says, you know, that's not right. And this world that we're seeing now that is clamoring for democracy, that is clamoring for green ways of living, is because we feel out of touch. We feel like we're not connected to people. There is not equality. There is not justice. There is not what I would call a regenerative way of life, which to me is actually beyond sustainability. We don't really want to sustain what we have. We need to go beyond it and really create a much more regenerative way of life. And capital, and I'm a recovering anti-capitalist, and this is my therapy, my life's work, is to say, you know what? It really isn't, money is not the problem. It's what we do with it that's the issue. It's the values that we ascribe to money. All human resources, everything that we make, falls into one of these categories, either degenerative or generative or regenerative. And you can think about this in terms of levels of toxicity, or because degenerative resources are essentially toxic. They can't be reabsorbed into the system. And this can exist both in terms of things that derive from the Earth's crust, fossil fuels or chemicals or things that will never ever go anywhere. There's nowhere for them to go. They stay trapped in our ecosystem forever. But there's also degenerative human behaviors. Violence would be an example of that. Poor communication patterns, self-destructive behaviors, things that we do that really are not regenerating our soul. And so thinking about this in terms of our capital, which is, again, it's an extension of who we are. It is a reflection of our core values. We begin to really think, hey, we can make more regenerative choices and stop poisoning society and the planet through our capital. And it requires a level of commitment to really change these behaviors. We can make these choices in every aspect of our lives, from the planet level all the way down to the personal level. What you do in your neighborhood matters. You know, what you do, where you shop, where you bank, where you invest your life savings. All that is a surplus that can be put to use towards creating a more regenerative society. And it all matters. It's not just about being local, because we're all global citizens. We all participate in the corporate world. Very few people on this planet are removed from that. Very few people in this society are removed from that. So we always have choices that we can make because, as I was saying, money has no intrinsic value. It doesn't have any value at all. It only has what we give it. And we can use it as a force for good in the world or not. The choice is always ours. Every single dollar that we have in our possession is an energetic force that can be used to do whatever we want to with it. And it does ripple. It does reflect our sacred trust. So the choice really is ours. And the world of regenerative capitalism involves a variety of different strategies, both at the corporate level and the community level, and what I would call the tangible, on-the-ground, real-world level, where you're dealing with land and water and things you can actually touch and feel and eat and all the ways in which we need to survive on this planet. And this is how we are seeing society change. It starts with how we shop. And everything that we wear, everything that we put into our bodies comes from somewhere. Certain methods of production were used. So really thinking about all the issues that went into producing that product and where did it come from and what about the working conditions of the people who made it and what about the environmental footprint that it took to make it and to get it here. All these things are costs, and what we're seeing now is more than ever is much greater awareness about the social and environmental costs associated with everything that is in our economy. And this information is becoming more readily available. There are actually iPhone apps that you can take and go scan barcodes for major products in stores and instantly have social and environmental performance data on what you're buying or thinking about buying. And you can make conscientious decisions now and say, oh, look at that company. I don't want anything to do with that company. You can do the same thing with your investments. You don't want to own this. You want to own that. You'd like to own something in order to try to influence it and make it a better version of itself. This is the world that we live in, the kind of impact that we can have with our money, and it is, in fact, changing society as we speak. I participated for a year and a half with Costco senior management to get them to adopt a sustainable seafood policy. They will no longer sell 12 endangered species. They're going to move to wild harvested salmon. They are the world's largest retailer of salmon. You know, this is corporate management realizing that it's in their best interests and their survival as a company to change the way they do business. We weren't going in there with antagonism. We were saying, look, we're shareholders. We care about this company succeeding, and we want you to be able to continue to be the world's leading retailer of seafood. It's good for your bottom line, but there is no profit if you deplete the fisheries. There's no long-term profitability there. So it requires going in and being gentle but persistent and really trying to persuade them to do business differently. It's because of this that Home Depot no longer sells timber from old-growth forests. They won't do it. And why Kinko's now will only use recycled paper. There are many, many examples of this, but we call this shareholder advocacy, using the power of ownership, the power of simply having a few shares in your IRA pooled with the thousands of shares, millions of shares all over the country as leverage, as a voice, as a collective voice saying, hey, there's a much better way to make money than the way you've been doing it up until now. It also means that sometimes we have to hold companies accountable. I'm very involved right now in the constitutional amendment that will hopefully reverse Citizens United and assert that corporations are in fact not people. This is going to be a very difficult battle, but this is the kind of work that we do to try to change capitalism. We all know the influence of money on politics needs to be stopped, and this is a really, really important struggle that we're fighting right now, but I can't think of anything more meaningful, anything that's better for a democratic society, changing the whole practices of the industry that I even represent. I go to Congress and I advocate for deeper reform for the financial service industry, and the Congress people go, what? You're in the industry and you want more regulation? I'm like, yeah, this is a risk to everyone if we all don't behave appropriately. And if we don't all act responsible, look at what just happened. The whole economic system is shaky at best because we are not being responsible. So it really is about transparency. It's about accountability. How do we use our influence to try to get these policies? Now, a lot of this is about what you stay away from. You know, a lot of people simply don't want to participate in what they would find ethically objectionable or fossil fuels or certain industries that they find objectionable. Nuclear power would be an example. For some, it might be military contractors. For others, it might be major polluters. It might be companies that have certain practices that they don't agree with. Maybe they have factories somewhere that have poor working conditions. That's been in the news lately. Maybe there are companies that have excessive executive pay while their workers are all laid off. Maybe these are companies that have a history of being anti-union. Maybe these are companies that really are irresponsible with regards to indigenous people's rights in the countries in which they operate. You know, there is a lot of research out there right now. We can hold these companies accountable and we can say, hey, do the right thing. It's good for business. You want greater customer loyalty? Don't be an irresponsible corporate citizen. We can show you what your peers are doing. We can show you that it is possible. So a lot of this, too, is, all right, well, there's plenty we can avoid, but what do we want to support? You know, there's a lot of industries that are going to transform society from the small business level all the way up to corporate America. And a lot of this is very familiar. The green economy is emerging because we are investing in it. We are buying those compact fluorescent light bulbs, which is why more of them are being produced. And it is amazing, but Walmart actually is the largest retailer of compact fluorescent light bulbs in the world. That's a pretty amazing thing. So more of that needs to happen. How we invest in renewable energy to make it more affordable for people, so the cost keeps coming down and so that it becomes more competitive to fossil fuel rates. There's a lot of things that we can support. Local is a really important trend. The whole relocalization movement is gaining steam as communities really think about how do we become more self-reliant and how do we prevent dollars from leaking away? You know, you can pay a few wages, but then what happens after that? Where do those profits go? Do they immediately fly across the ocean to benefit some other community? Or how long can it circulate locally? And a lot of this happens through local ownership of our resources and the businesses in the community. It helps keep the multiplier effect going, helps keep the dollar circulating more locally, helps create more jobs locally. And many more people are thinking local and buying local. And that's a wonderful evolution. And at the same time, there's a tension there because a lot of people think that corporate goods and big box retailers are cheaper. And so there's this competing interest of what's better, the pure financial bottom line or what I would call the triple bottom line of social and environmental and financial performance. Because it all matters. The cheapest stuff is not the best stuff for society, ultimately. And that's a difficult one for people to grasp in tough economic times. But it is important, and it still is happening. A living economy. What is a living, thriving economy? And I've been sort of hitting on it, this idea that for an economy to be alive, it needs to really have much greater control over its resources. Its food, its water, its energy, its building materials, its clothing, its basic survival needs. That, you know, communities and states and regions that can take care of these things have the opportunity to not rely on imports. And ultimately, that's what we're talking about, is substitution for imports. We should be net producers of what we need to survive. That's a living economy, where we're producing what we need and not depending on others to make it for us and ship it here. That is starting to happen. There's much more awareness. Food and energy are the primary areas where most people have grabbed onto this. And that's a great place to start. But now we need to move on. We need to keep going. There's many more aspects of how we live our lives. Energy matters. There's so much going into renewable energy right now. It's wonderful. It's something, you know, that is necessary. We understand that our entire military regime is meant to allow us access to cheap oil, and that is no longer enabling our country to survive. We're going broke because of it. And so this transition is happening, thank goodness. The same with food. We're moving where there's greater consciousness now about slow food, about the idea of moving away from factories and having food travel 1,000,000 miles to get here. And let's think about what's bioregionally appropriate, and let's support the local small farmers and the community-supported agricultural systems and try to encourage them to not export so much so that we can have more of what we need. And let's buy from them instead of importing from other places. This way of thinking is catching on. This is all very exciting. There are other issues around the workplace. Working conditions, child labor issues, respect for diversity as far as benefits go, safety, the amount of hours that people work, the right to unionize. These are all really, really important workplace issues that are becoming much more on the minds of consumers as they think about, well, what do I want to support? And we all know of companies that have bad reputations as far as being poor workplaces. Well, why do we patronize them? We shouldn't give them our money then. We should encourage everybody to raise their standard and then prioritize and give our money to those that really get it, that are really trying really hard to take care of their most important asset. If you're in business, you know that your number one asset is your employees. There is really, as a business, nothing more important than that. And a lot of businesses are finally realizing that. They have to take care of their people. They have to invest in their people. Because happy employees have higher morale. They are more productive. And those companies, research shows, are more profitable than those where management and labor are always fighting and bickering and they don't get along, and those companies, unsurprisingly, are not as profitable. Ownership. Some of this is how a company is owned. And it also has to do with decision making. The level of involvement that employees might have in decision making. Who owns the company? Is it a cooperatively owned company? Or is it really hierarchical in its structure? What about responsiveness to shareholders? What about being willing to operate for the benefit not just of owners, but of other kinds of stakeholders too? We're seeing all kinds of different types of corporate structures now, benefit corporations, sustainable business corporations, where in their charters and in their operating agreements, they're saying, we agree to operate not just for the benefit of owners, but also the community and the environment and our employees and the customers, and we're willing to be held accountable to that standard. That's fundamentally changing what a corporation really is. Just like money, there's nothing wrong with a corporation. Corporations are not inherently evil. We just have to give them better values. And then they'll be the kind of corporations that we can be proud of and that we would want to give our money to. What about community? Do they give back to the community? Are they involved in the community? It's not just about philanthropy. It's about engagement. It's about involvement. It's about what benefits do you really provide to your community besides the jobs that you might provide to employees. It's what being a really good community citizen is all about. There's lots of leadership going on. We all know companies in our community that are excellent corporate citizens. And we like that about them. And we like that they know us and they know who we are. And it makes us want to go back because there's a relationship there. Companies that have a relationship with their community and a relationship with their customers make us feel good. We want to continue to give them our business. There's lots of well-tested strategies for doing this. And also, I think community is about helping those who are less fortunate. Sending our capital to communities in need where people are trying to get on their feet and get into home ownership, and they're trying to start small businesses. And these communities are everywhere, here and all over the place. There's a lot going on right now. You've probably heard of microfinance and all the little ways that we can invest in empowering the marginalized in our planet. The inequality in our planet is striking. There's a lot we could do with our money to help reduce that gap. Not just reduce the gap in our community and in our country, but the gap between nations as well. So we're seeing a lot of community development finance going on, loaning money to financial institutions worldwide that in turn loan money to people to help them start businesses and get into home ownership. And sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot. And most of the times it's giving this money to women. And their default rate is way lower than it is for men globally. And that's smart. So let's invest in women, you know? And as a man, I'm saying that. And why not? Absolutely. It's what we need that. We absolutely need that. So really what this is about is redefining what regenerative is. We're going to create a regenerative civilization where we foster equality and we foster harmony with nature. Then we really have to think about, every dollar that we spend. And in a lot of ways, we have to create carbon. These are dung beetles and forests. And primary strategies for reducing global warming are to try to build up the carbon that we need and things that will eat up the excess CO2. This is what we need. So we need to be investing in reforestation. And I would say we need to be investing in food forestation. Imagine a mature, healthy forest that was completely edible from the canopy layer on down to the root layer. Why can't we have that kind of forestry? I'd love to be a forager in that kind of reality, And it just means that agriculture has to be different, and agroforestry has to be different. But I don't believe that we lack any of the technologies or any of the techniques to do anything that I'm talking about here. This stuff is already happening. There's nothing really new about it. It's getting back to having some sense about what our priorities are. How are we going to survive and thrive on this planet? How do we evolve capitalism so we can get to this place where caring for people and caring for the planet is on equal terms to making a dollar? I think we can do it. It's really the only ethical imperative there is. So put your money where your heart is. Let's get out there and change the world. Thank you.